Hi, welcome to this week's edition of Blue Soccer again. John, Dave, and myself are going to look back over Leinster's epic victory against Connacht last weekend. All the other Rainbow Cup action, of course, look forward to our game against Ulster on Friday night. So, gents, that was a bit of a topsy-turvy game. 16-0 down after about 16 minutes. And then suddenly we were up after 22 minutes or 23 minutes. And then we ran out fairly comfortably in the end, 50 points to 21.
It's
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go. After you. Age before beauty.
Okay. Well, all I was going to say was that it's a measure of how I have kind of switched off on the season at this stage, that I didn't even see the Munster game. I saw the score and I asked you guys, was it a good game? And you said no. So I said, right, I won't bother looking at it. So, and I actually missed the first 15 minutes of our game, which is probably a good thing by the sound of it. So, that has probably not happened in a very long time.
Imagine if you just watched the first 15 minutes and said, fuck this, I'm off.
It has happened. I'd say it must be 15 years since I've missed, the start of a Leinster game like that with an amazingly good excuse. And I didn't have an amazingly good excuse. But anyway, onto the game itself. We really came back and gave him a good scene too. But in an odd way, like we turned into Exeter. We turned into Jason's favourite team and just started going at them and mauling them to bits. So, it was a very odd kind of a game. Yes, you would have said there was a bit of, as soon as we lost to them in our last outing, you would have said there was a bit of spice in the game. But there was certainly spice at the beginning, by all accounts, from Connacht, and then they faded rather quickly. But why do we reckon they lost the run of themselves so early on? Got a nosebleed from scoring.
I think it's more the fact that we found the run of ourselves. We started off. I mean, okay, the second try was ridiculous. I mean, it was a silly try to give away. I mean, it was it was an intercept and all that. So it was what it was. But we were soaking tackles. We weren't imposing ourselves, and then we started imposing ourselves. I mean, it's like the Exeter game. We just a switch clicked. I thought Frawley was very good in that first period.
Delayed that pass.
That little double pump on the pass was a thing of beauty. Keenan played very well, and then after that first maul try, we realised, Jesus lads, we have these boys on toast. Let's just get into their. We didn't even have to get into their 22. Let's get around their 22 and get some lineouts, and then that was it. That's all she wrote.
Yeah,
which was actually quite disappointing if you think about it, because Connacht had some guys that are quite highly rated in the pack, and Jason's third favorite player in Finlay Beelum. But I mean, their front five would have been quite highly rated, and it was taken apart. Absolutely taken apart. They're going to have some hard looks at themselves, particularly when the guy that they kind of looked to seal that up is off in Quinn Roon. I'm sure we'll talk about that later. Obviously they didn't have Delan there, but Thornbury, who's a guy who's attracted a lot of column inches and a lot of praise this year, wasn't mapped at all in the game. And our back row were far more dominant. We could even afford, well, I don't know if Ford came into it, we could certainly afford to be careful with Jack Conan.
I think he went off for HIA.
He went off for HIA, yeah, but I from what I heard, he passed it, but they decided not to risk him.
Yeah, and it was interesting.
But we had just to finish that, we had Josh van der Fleer on the bench, and we were able to shift Scott Penny to number 8.
Yeah, like they took him off early enough. They took him off after 24 minutes, so I'm not sure. Like we kind of got our foot back into the game. I think it was 19-16 or something at that point. So, do you know what I mean? Like it wasn't. We hadn't walked away with the game when he got injured, but thankfully, anyway, he's okay, because it'd be terrible to see him, miss out on his line store.
Line store.
Yeah, but like I thought it was interesting that they took off Ross Byrne after 55 minutes, and Ringrose was ended up shifted into 10. I don't know whether Ross was injured or whether it was a precautionary thing, because Frawley was gone. We know Sexton's gone. Harry Byrne is out with a hammer. You know what I mean? So if they've got to play the rest of this tournament, they're probably saying, well, we've won the game at that point. After 55 minutes, we've kind of won the game. What's the point in risking our only fit or one of our only top of the top 4 out halves? Obviously, they still have Hawkshaw, but he's 5th choice. So, maybe they just took him off as a precaution.
I certainly think so. I mean, I think from what I can make out watching him, he certainly hasn't been comfortable on that leg for a while.
He wasn't kicking either. Sure, he wasn't.
No. No, he was initially, but we saw it in the Exeter game as well. Some of his gait did not look comfortable. But as you say, the opportunity arose to take him off early, so they took him off early. Plus, not necessarily. I mean, normally I'm not a big fan of switching players into positions just to see how they do, but I would have been interested to see Ringrose at 10.
Yeah, I didn't think that's what happened there. I just thought that.
No, I don't. I think they took Byrne off to protect him. But I'm saying I was interested to see Ringrose at 10.
Yeah. I think one lad, like you mentioned him there, was Keenan. Like he scored a hat trick, and he said he'd only scored one other try for Leinster. So, I mean, if you're gonna do it, you might as well come back with a bang there. Like I'd say he must have felt slightly disappointed because he featured in all of Ireland's games since the return after the return to play last September, and he played fairly well for Ireland, and obviously he played playing for Leinster. He's got to this winning the league and getting to the semi-final of Europe. I'm sure he might have been a little bit disappointed that he wasn't included on that tour, and I'm sure he'd be one of the first names on the reserve list if they need somebody to fly out.
No, I'm not sure he's been around long enough for the likes of Gatland to be.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Taking him as read, I mean,
and he's not Scottish either. And
there are few enough guys who make a Lions tour straight out the bat on their first season. Few enough. I mean, you can probably, there's a handful that you can remember, but that's about it. So I'd say the tour probably came the tour came too early for him and too late for James Ryan.
Yeah, that's very fair enough.
And too early for the likes of Ronan Kelleher, and if Warren Gatland was the Irish coach for the last 5 years, he might have got it. Either of them might have had a shot because he would have seen them up close and personal and would have known what they had to offer. I mean, I think Hugh Keenan is an absolutely great player. He has that understated ability. Like, he's not really the same kind of player as Gervin Dempsey, but he does everything so well. Like, I suppose you should expect that from any player at a professional level, but he just seems to be so assured of his play, and so everything about it, he never seems to.
Although I do think he could have cooled his jets a bit when he was rushing out for that last Connacht try.
Yeah, well, at that stage, he probably lost a bit of concentration. But yeah, look, he's not perfect, but
I mean, he's very, like we say, it's his first year.
He's very assured in.
He does. He makes no clangers. You often see players, and they like. I've rarely seen him let the ball bounce, and I think that's a very good sign of a fullback who's got great positional sense, that they know exactly where the ball's going to fly to.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy with him. Very happy with his progression this year. He's been one of the success stories of the season.
And his handling and the way he gets through players as well. Like he doesn't look like a guy who's a naturally gifted athlete in world rugby terms. He doesn't look like he's
very cultish.
Exactly. Yeah, he just has that A, commitment, and B, I suppose attention to detail. Is it? I can't quite define what he has.
He takes great lines.
Yeah.
So he does. He takes lines that guarantee, that give him a chance. Like I say, maybe he's not when he's up against what we'll say are superior physical specimens. The lines he takes give him the edge against them. Yeah,
it's the Franz Beckenbauer approach.
Yeah.
I'm not the fastest from A to B, but I never started A.
I wish we could get the ball into his hands more frequently, because I think he just always seems to make yards whenever we do get the ball,
Yeah.
whether it's for Ireland or Leinster. I just don't think
Well, I think
happens enough.
if you think back to over the last year and a bit since he's been playing, I think you'll find that most of his most eye-catching performances have come with Frawley at centre. With that second distributor slightly further out. He really takes advantage of that. Like the try we saw against Connacht at the weekend was a classic example of him running off the second receiver.
Yeah.
Irvin Dempsey used to do that a lot as well, coming into the
Yeah.
line the way he did, at the right place at the right time. Again, positional, not starting from A, knowing where to be, knowing where the ball is going to be, not just in defence but in attack as well. Garvin Dempsey got on the end of a lot of tries for Ireland, or was involved, running into the line from full back, and he wasn't the fastest guy. Actually, Hugo Keenan is quite fast, but Garvin Dempsey wasn't the fastest guy on the planet.
Garvin will shift. Take a look at him.
He had Dennis Hickey beside him to compare him against.
Yeah.
He's not going to flatter anyone.
Garv could shift.
Yeah.
We haven't made up a song about him yet, so he still has a bit to go.
Yeah.
Or a t-shirt, Dave.
Well, that's not my
Just
call.
saying.
I'm just a.
I'm
just a hat. Yeah, exactly.
Humble monk.
So, that result shouldn't really have been in doubt when you think that there was, say, 5 starters. There was 5 starters in the match that played in the European Cup semi. There was 3 that were on the bench started, and then there was a rake of them that were on the bench that had played or started in the previous week against La Rochelle. Like we put out a very strong team, and I was quite surprised. I thought we were going to go nearly full rotation and play squad members, and give everyone a chance at the end of the season. But they've actually, the management seemed to be taking, certainly on their selection, from their selection point of view, taking the tournament reasonably serious.
She might as well. There's nothing else left now that you've lost the La Rochelle.
Yeah, I know, but you think they might say, well, look, we've been playing pretty consistently since September. You know what I mean? Like most leagues are kind of finishing in May anyway. We're going to go on until middle of June. The lines are going on till August, I think. No, August. Yeah, August.
Yeah.
And then they're back again in presumably September, October.
I think that what we'll see is, because the guys did have a certain amount of layoffs during the season, in fairness, for various reasons. I think what we'll see is, I think for the certainly for the Ulster game as well, maybe for the Glasgow game, we'll see a continuation of this blended rotation policy. Can we call it that we saw for the Connacht game?
Yeah, but they were all first teamers, Dave, is what I'm trying to say. There was no no kind of young academy guys. Like if you go through the team, Dooley, Tracy, Porter.
Oh yeah, I understand.
Maloney, Fardy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so we played pretty much, if we have a squad of say 30 first teamers, that's the pool that they came from. They didn't go down to the 20 or 30 below that. These were all guys that will be in the depth chart of from 1 to 30.
The other thing to remember is that these guys, we'll taking out the guys who are off to the lines and the Irish, if you like, first 15 guys. There is a summer program for the national team, and players have to be kept ready for that as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned earlier about Quinn Roux. Quinn Roux obviously was offered a contract by Connacht, but declined it, and he wants to go off somewhere in France.
Yeah, I think my thinking is, I like Quinn Roux a lot. I think he's a really good player. I think he's the only player of his type really in Irish rugby. And I think I think it's a quiver you should always have in your arrow, or a quiver or an arrow you should always have in your quiver. Jesus, I'm turning to Bertie Ahern here. I think it's an arrow you should always have in your quiver. But if he's not going to be getting Irish caps, and he's going to get more money abroad, and he's 30, and he has to start looking, what's he going to do when he's 34? Don't blame him. I mean, he's been here 9 years. He's won a Grand Slam, a Challenge Cup, and a couple of Pro 14s. That's pretty good going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was well liked.
He was well liked
in Connacht. Yeah. I heard him on
Connacht. Joe Schmidt was a big fan.
Yeah, I heard him on a podcast there maybe about 6 months ago, around Christmas, and he came across as a very genuine, down-to-earth guy, and he was
I have a lot of
talking
time for
about
him.
his parents, and I think his parents were brought over, you know, just to sort of as a surprise for him or something like that. I think Connacht did something like that for him for his 100th. I think it was his 100th appearance for them, and yeah, it was kind of a nice touch. But yeah, so it's sort of sad to see him go. Like, he obviously came to Leinster first when he first came over, and he only lasted a couple of seasons. And I think Matt O'Connor didn't fancy him, and he sent him down to Connacht. I think he stayed down there, like a few other guys. I think Cooney had something similar as well.
The impeccable judgment of Matt O'Connor strikes again.
Yeah. Anyway, we've moved on from him, haven't we?
He is a guy I would have kept, Quinn Rue, if it had been possible. Because we had Damien Brown, and we never replaced. I suppose Faraday kind of fulfills that role, but we never had that kind of tank.
Yeah.
No.
Anyway, wish him all the best, obviously, for his future. I think I saw somewhere he might be going to Toulon. It's not a bad place to spend a couple of years anyway.
Well, after delivering that Grand Slam, I think all of them can do whatever they want.
Exactly. Yeah. So just looking at some of the other fixtures, Munster, you mentioned this, John, wasn't a great game. I actually recorded it, went to watch it, fell asleep after a quarter of an hour, woke up on the couch at 3:30 in the morning, and that was the end of my viewing of it. But Munster seemed to walk away pretty handy winners, 38-10. I didn't see the incident, but I believe Will Addison was definitely deserved his red card.
Oh yeah, it was a red card, stone bunker. There's no question of it. It was a stupid thing to do. Possibly a guy who's been out of the game a long time, trying too hard when he comes back, but it was just dumb. And there's a lot of dumb in that Ulster squad. And it's players of all different sorts. You'd wonder, is the dumb coming from the top?
Yeah, well, we'll talk maybe more in depth about Ulster, because obviously we're playing them up next on Friday night. But like, they put out a pretty strong side. In fact, but again, both sides were quite full. You know, like there was a lot of big hitters on both sides selected, and you know, I'm kind of glad, because the tournament is getting nothing but negative press from every angle. I mean, it's even supporters wouldn't have a big buy-in for it. Certainly the media don't. But it's actually good to see them picking fairly strong sides, far stronger sides than you might see in the regular season interpros, especially the ones over Christmas. So it's actually good seeing, let's say, somewhere between 10 and 12 of your first liners having out. But like, you know, again, I mean, you'd have to look at the names. Even on the Munster team, like they had Kilcoyne, Scannell, Ryan, Byrne, O'Mahony, Coombs, Murray, JJ, Conway, Halley all started, and then you'd CJ and Delande on the bench. So like, that's a bloody good side.
Yeah, no, there were strong teams, and Munster were much more on it. They were much more clever with how they went about it. Obviously, the red card had an effect. Even the 20 minutes of it that it is now, it still had an effect. And Ulster were just dumb.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We talk more in depth about them when we're talking about just going through some of the other games. Not sure if you saw the Zebre Benetton game.
I did. I thought it was a great game.
Yeah, it was a very good game, but
very entertaining game of rugby,
and a hilarious decision. I'm not sure if many people when they did the challenge.
Oh yeah.
So they did the captain's challenge, and I think it was Zebre wanted to challenge a decision. So the referee said, well, actually, the story is now that you deliberately collapsed the ball, and it was a penalty try. So they actually end up shooting themselves in the foot. They got a player yellow carded. They were awarded a penalty try against them. So there was obviously an automatic 7 points rather than just the 5 that they originally challenged for. So it completely went against them, which that was, just be careful what you wish for with those captain's challenges.
But it was an entertaining game of rugby with, you know, the right amount of spite that you'd expect for a local derby.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed it, I have to say.
Glasgow, another local derby, Glasgow Edinburgh, was fisticuffs on that one as well. What's your views on the 20-minute red card?
I kind of like it. Because red cards ruin the game, it's a good thing. But because red cards ruin the game justifiably, you know, if somebody has if it's a real red card offence, you know, so I'm not saying it's an unequivocal yes from me to the new rule, but like you do feel a lot, especially if the red card happens very early, that it's a huge punishment for the team. And if it's a red card that's kind of borderline, it should have been yellow, or if it's a second yellow that turns into a red, although that's unlikely to happen too early in a game, it really is a big punishment for the team. So to be able to bring another player on after 20 minutes, it just, maybe they need to have a third card, which is, you know, leave the red card alone and call that thing some other color card.
Dave Cahill's black card plus TN.
Exactly. Exactly. I'd be
or would you be less equivocal if instead of 20 minutes it was 30 minutes?
Yeah, like how far back into the game does it? You know what I mean? 30 minutes. If it happens in the first half, you know, but if it doesn't happen in the first half, there's hardly any point. You know.
But we had a situation in the Cardiff Dragons game, right? That there was I think it was the Dragons scrum half was going up the sideline. Cardiff guy came in, high shot with his shoulder to the chin, knocks your man. It was late, knocks your man into touch, fine. Cardiff lad gets a red card. That already had a yellow card, so obviously the yellow card comes back on. But 20 minutes later, the red card comes back on, and then Cardiff, back up to their full complement of players in the last minute, scored a try to win the game against the Dragons. So, do you know, well, like, I'm not saying that obviously could have still happened if the red card was an indefinite red card for the game, but because they were back to their full complement in the last few minutes, it was 15 against 15, and, you know, Cardiff were going for it, and they scored that try to win the game. So, like, and I think, like, say, it was kind of it was a dirty act. Like, do you remember the Jared Payne incident a number of years ago against Saracens, where he went up and caught the ball in the air, and who was it? I can't remember.
Good. Alex Good
came down and landed awkwardly or badly, and Payne got a record. Like that wasn't a malicious piece of play, but a guy running over and late tackling somebody and clocking him in the head kind of is. So, you know, there's certain times that they say, oh, the players, like, say, for example, Peter O'Mahony won in the Six Nations. I didn't think that was a particularly malicious piece of play, and maybe 5 years ago wouldn't have even been looked at. Whereas, you know, because of the way the World Rugby wanted to be refereed, it's a red card, and you can't really argue against it. But if there's, or even, I'm not sure if you saw the Harlequins fullback at the weekend, what's his name? Mike Brown. Like, Mike Brown stamped on someone's head. So, that is a deliberate piece of foul play. That's a red card in anyone's language, and I don't really think that that's the same as somebody who might, you know, I don't know, like even the Cardiff one, for example, when, like, he did hit him late, but he hit him with the shoulder to the head. But just kind of, I don't know whether you like, as you said, John, maybe have two, because it could be you could get a red card for two separate incidences, and they're very different. One is a malicious piece of dirty foul play, and one is just the way the rules are interpreted now, as opposed to the way they were a few seasons ago.
It's a perfectly valid point, Jay. I couldn't argue with any of that. I can't argue with a red card being a permanent player off. I can't argue with a red card bin, the 20-minute thing, for the reasons you've all said and in the cases you've all said. I mean, then what it comes down to is you have a situation where we say that there's an extra card. It's up to the referee's interpretation to decide whether it was, we say, foul play or very foul play.
Yeah.
And that's a lot to put on a ref, I mean, okay, in the incidents you gave, for example, the Jared Payne one versus, we'll say, the Mike Brown one, that's easy. Those are the two kind of extremes, if you like. The red card that's just more orange than red, whereas the red card that's flaming scarlet. The truth is that in the vast majority of decisions around red cards, red and yellow cards, or sorry, yellow to red cards and red cards aren't actually that clear cut. That's the problem. That there's a lot of,
but
for all these red cards, there's a lot of grey areas.
But it is by sort of committee now, because you've got the two touch judges, the referee, and the TMO, all kind of coming together, viewing the incident, and then they're very methodical in how they go through it. You know what I mean? Because there seems to be far more red cards now than there used to be, because they obviously want to clamp down on the high tackle. But they do seem to go through it and say, well, let's have a look at all the angles. Was there intent? Rather than somebody just getting a rush of blood. So rather than a referee just getting a rush of blood to the head and flashing the card.
Well, they do have the framework, particularly for high tackles, which is a step-by-step process. You'll often hear them say, was it high? Yes, it was. Then was there mitigation? Was there a drop in height? Blah blah blah. And that's literally like if you ever have it open in front of you when one of these things is happening, you can actually see the guy go through. And that's, in a way, that's a good thing, because the ref knows exactly where he stands, and he knows that this is what he has to do, or what World Rugby want him to do in every single circumstance. My big fear is that the red card, the 20-minute red card, would encourage more red cards.
Yeah, it could possibly happen. Yeah.
Because there isn't the same consequence. And by encouraging more red cards, I'm not saying that players will be, well, players may well, the two sides of it are, players may well be less engaged with the safety of other players, and refs may be less concerned about giving them.
Yeah, but I don't think the players go out to purposely.
Oh no, they don't. No. But sometimes you see players that they are. Sometimes players are reckless as to the safety of other players.
But you do hear
not
players
deliberately
talking about
forethought, but they are.
But you do hear players giving out to other players for getting a yellow card, and if they have to play for 14 men for 10 more minutes, then you know what I mean. Like it's not that it's kind of slap on the back here. Listen, that was a nice bit of dirty play you did there. It was well worth the 10 minutes. Like, the players don't think of it like that.
Jason, you've played against Barnhall. You know that's what they do.
The worst one was the guards. I played against the guards, and that was the dirtiest match I've ever played in. So just go look. I suppose it's good to see it been trialed. But
the South Africans do not like the captain's challenge. A number of journalists this weekend, or yesterday and today, in South African newspapers, have complained about the captain's challenge. They just don't like it. They think it's stupid.
Well, I suppose it's how you use it. I mean, like Luke McGrath, I thought wasted his. You know what I mean? Like the referee gave Connacht the try. Now maybe he was trying to stem the tide. At that stage, we had just gone 16-0 down. We were being kind of overrun after the first quarter of an hour, and maybe he just wanted to hope against hope that to put his finger in the dike sort of thing. But like, the referee was standing right beside it. Like, it was him that made the decision, because he called it on the pitch. It just seemed.
And then when it went on slow-mo and the ref talked through it, it was obviously not anything wrong with it. Like, it was obviously the correct decision. So I'm surprised that Ulster have been using it so often in the way they've been using it, because they're
looking to get people.
Yeah, and we all know what the people of Ulster feel about touts.
Tar and feathered.
Yeah, but it's I'm not sure I like it. I'm not sure I'm not sure how I feel about it. It's one of those things that there are elements of it I like because it gives the player some sense of control. There are elements of it I don't like because sometimes there's an awful lot of like the Luke McGrath thing, which was a bit silly. Maybe though it was a tactical thing. He was just trying to stop play for 5 minutes, get the lads under the post and sort them out. But I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, just the other game was Scarlets against Ospreys.
I do like the dropout. Can I say I like the dropout?
Yeah, it's rugby league, isn't it? That's what they do for rugby league when the ball is held up over the line. Yeah, I mean, it's all like when you see you got to be sure where you're going to put your drop kick, because if you see big lads if it falls into the wrong set of hands and they can get a 30-meter run up to the defending line, like they can make inroads.
Well,
I wouldn't like to be trying to stop Abraham Papialihi.
No.
With a good run.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
I just think anyway, that dropout thing, if you were a team that had a ferocious scrum, you'd hate it. Like getting held up, get straight back up, scrum them over the line. Like you would absolutely, Saracens or Exeter or somebody that would absolutely detest that ruling because they have somebody on toast and then all of a sudden they have to run it back from,
I think that rule is designed to stop that, like to exactly as you're saying, and to stop the, like all clubs are using now. Exeter probably were one of the first. We kind of followed suit, taking those tap and go penalties, and there's repetitive. I think World Rugby wants to make the game more free flowing rather than just to slow it down to maul after maul after maul.
Yeah.
Did they bring in the 50-20 kick in the end?
No, not in this competition.
I would have liked to seen that. I think that could have created more space and make the game more free flowing.
I think they're still trialing it in Australia, aren't they?
Okay.
Yeah. Well, they're obviously their season now is going to go trans-Tasman, so I think they're actually in that competition. I think they're getting rid of
Captain's Challenge.
The Captain's Challenge, yeah.
It's a Southern Hemisphere thing. They almost hate it down there.
Yeah. Snitches get stitches.
It does kind of slow up the game. Like, I mean, it was one of the matches I was watching, and it was like, my God. Oh yeah, that's what I was thinking about that, because I think that Captain's Challenge. I was one of the Welsh games I was watching, and like it seemed to kind of take a little bit of the impetus away from the TMO getting involved, because if it's really bad, that Captain's Challenge is going to come into place. So I don't need to adjudicate here. There was one incident, I can't remember specifically what it was. I think it was in the Cardiff Dragons game. And I remember thinking to myself, like, why, like, if that was in certainly most of the and particularly this year, there has been a lot of Irish derbies, therefore with Irish referees. And watching those games, the TMO seems to intervene far more than whoever was the TMO in that Cardiff Dragons game thing.
I think part of the problem is I don't know if you guys have been watching. Have you been watching the South African Rainbow Cup at all?
Bits and pieces.
There was one of the games at the weekend. Each team had about 4 or 5 successful captain's challenges.
Oh, they have indefinite ones there, do they?
No, if you get it right, you keep it.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that.
Oh yeah. If you say if Luke McGrath made that captain's challenge, right?
Yeah.
And the ref had agreed with him, or the outcome had been that Luke was right and it wasn't a try, then Leinster still would have had their captain's challenge.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
You only lose it when you lose one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but in the game in South Africa, both teams were getting them right all the time, and the rest were going with them. So, but I must say the South African teams look in fine fettle.
They do,
and they're playing some really nice rugby as well.
Yeah. And it'd be great to see some of those stadiums full when we play next season, because the one in Cape Town looks amazing.
I'd love to see a full strength Leinster. I mean, I don't know if it'll ever happen. Go down and take on the Blues or the Sharks or whatever, and see those great grounds filled.
Yeah. Like, I think that pro rugby, or whatever it's called, they need to if they want this to get off the ground and get off the ground with a real bang at the start, they need to work with all of the unions to say, we're going to schedule some big fixtures. Like, and it all this, like, all respect to the other clubs, but there's certain big clubs in this league, and there's ones that aren't. But they need to say, we're going to send, let's say, 4 teams down to South Africa, like let's say Glasgow. I'm picking one of the Welsh teams, let's say Scarlets, Leinster and Munster. And we're going to send them down together, and there's going to be a little tour that they're all going to play while they're there down in South Africa every week. But it's going to be at a particular time in the season when Leinster and those other 3 clubs will send down their strongest, or like
they can go full loaded.
Their first, let's say, go down, and they can play 3 weeks or 4 weeks in a row on a mini tour down there, and they'll all be full strength teams, so that the South African paying public will all buy in. Hopefully they'll be back in stadiums by then, and that they will say, "Wow, we're watching Gary Ringwell," and watching the fellas. A lot of those clubs, Lions players play, instead of sending down, for like good players for all he is and everything. They wouldn't know. They wouldn't have a clue who he is.
Yeah, and the same quid pro quo.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
we'd see the
Khaleesi,
loaded,
for example.
Yeah, see Khaleesi and Cree, like like basically all the stars, Mornay Stain, all those guys. Yeah, no, yeah. I think that's very important for the promotion of the league.
Yeah, I mean, like, it was exciting when the Kings and
the Cheetahs in particular.
The Cheetahs were, but I mean, there was a bit of fiasco when we went down there. Obviously, with, I think it was Issa, wasn't it? They didn't have his
passports.
Yeah, but like, that's fine. Okay, that's an admin thing that they weren't used to, and it probably won't never happen again. But it was kind of disappointing when you went in and you watched it on telly, and there was quite disappointing crowds. It kind of looked, God, it's like watching, it's like another Pro 14 game when you see the half-empty stadiums in Wales or in Italy.
Yeah.
As opposed to being ultimately hyped with all of our stars going down there and taking them on and making it a real, international fixture between 2 big clubs.
The skills are there in European rugby in terms of promotion. I mean, they turned, in 25 years, they turned the European Cup into the biggest competition in Northern Hemisphere rugby. Right? You only have to look at the column inches that a minority sport like Ireland, like rugby gets in Ireland during the Six Nations. The marketing and promotion skills are there in European rugby. But they have to be backed up with full strength teams to go down to South Africa and cause a buzz, and bring the South African teams up here and cause a buzz.
Yeah, definitely. But like, I mean, we've been saying for years that if, let's say, Edinburgh are playing Leinster, or why don't they schedule those matches? Let's say Edinburgh against Ulster, or Edinburgh against Connacht, or Edinburgh against Munster or Leinster on the same weekend. If they're going to play a match over the Ireland Scotland
during the tournament, pair them. Like, we've been saying this for years, and yet there could be, Leinster could be playing at home again. And like, obviously there's 4 teams from Ireland, but it just takes one to go over to, and even have, like, just say Leinster played against Glasgow on a Friday night. And if you were saying, we'll go, well, you know what, I might go to, it's only an hour on the train away. Even if I'm staying in Edinburgh, I might go out in Glasgow, go to on the Friday night and get on the train and go back to Edinburgh and go to the Ireland game on the Saturday. Like, it just doesn't seem to, but instead they'll have both of those clubs could be playing away from home, where you can't go to either because you might have gone over to the international. Like, it just doesn't seem to, doesn't seem to be any joined up thinking when the fixture lists are done, that it accommodates all these local derbies with matches that are, of. See, you could turn every weekend into a massive festival of rugby in terms of, you'd have the national team, the under-20s, the women's, and some of the provinces involved.
Yeah.
You have a huge festival of rugby.
Agree with you. There should be more of it. Anyway, look, we play Ulster. We kind of spoke briefly again about Ulster just when their defeat to, but like, they put out a pretty strong team. I just went through it. They had Henderson, Murphy, Tom O'Toole, Matheson, Lowry at out half, McCluskey, Addison and Stockdale. Like, that's a pretty good side. And like, they've now lost 3 on the bounce. They were beaten by Leicester, Munster, and Leinster by Leinster in the was it Leinster? Yeah, they've lost their last 3 games, I think.
Yeah, Ulster did. Yeah,
They lost to Connacht.
They lost to
Yes,
Connacht,
sir.
then they lost to Leicester, and then they lost to Munster.
Yeah.
That's it. So yeah,
it was. I was kind of fearing that would happen to us, losing 3 in a row, and I would have had to turn to Dave and say, when was the last time Leinster lost 3 in a row? God, it must be a while ago. Matt O'Connor days, perhaps?
2003.
Is it that long? Oh, shit. Okay.
No, it's not. No, I lied. It was 2010, 2011. Name that coach.
Joe Schmidt.
he lost the dressing room though at that stage, hadn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, he lost his first 3 or 4 games, in fact. Was that the last time he lost? Wow.
But look, the thing is, Ulster, I think, have the playing talent. I think that they actually, I mean, okay, I'm not saying that they're Leinster. I'm not even saying that they're, Munster in terms of attitude. I think they have better players slightly than Munster. But there's something wrong there. There's just something that's not right. We saw it against Leicester. We saw it against Munster. There's a huge amount of stupid in that team.
I heard Ferris giving out yards about them, and he's going back to that chestnut of, they're not from Ulster. Like, I'm not sure if I really agree with that, because there's, like, you've got Leinster who adhere to that model. Munster try to. They've obviously bought imports in, but very few other teams in world rugby have an all local boys club. Do you know what I mean? It's not the Lisbon Lions anymore. It's the teams are made up from lots of different places and lots of imports and from different nationalities.
I think that he's looking for an answer, and I think he's found something that is an answer, but it's not necessarily the right one. There is a problem in that Ulster team. I'm not saying it's a problem in the dressing room or a problem with the players' attitudes or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all. But there is a problem in that team somewhere in terms of the team's attitude on the pitch. Attitude is the wrong word, because they're just really stupid. And I think the part of the problem comes from the top.
Which top though? Like, they got rid of Lowry, or what was his name? Stephen, the guy who was running who wasn't really a rugby man, who was running the province finance.
Yeah.
They got rid of him. They got rid of Les Kiss. They got like all the people you would say at the top are have been got rid of. So what top is it that's?
Well, there's the thing. You got 2 choices. If you keep changing the coaches and you keep changing the management, and the results don't improve, which they haven't, then what are you going to do? You're going to have to sack all the players. That's not going to happen.
Well, that pretty much happens anyway on a regular basis, and especially with players.
They do roll them over, but the same things keep happening again. So something has to change somewhere.
But they, like, in fairness to them, they only lost 2 matches in the regular season of the Pro 14 or Pro 12,
I know. Yeah.
As it was last season. Right, they're both against Leinster. They were beaten at home by Toulouse. No, sorry, they were beaten away. They were beaten away. They're beaten at home by Toulouse, and they're beaten away, which a game they definitely should have won, against Gloucester. But they seem to have a problem of winning the harder matches. Like, they can go out and beat Glasgow and Edinburgh and Dragons, etc. But when it comes down to it, and this isn't a new thing. Like, this has been going on for practically the entirety of the last decade, or probably 15 years.
15 years since they won a trophy, and that was
15 years since they won a trophy, yeah. But like, in the big games, like, we mentioned it briefly in that match that Jared Payne got sent off against Saracens. They had a home quarter final. Admittedly, Saracens were a very good side, but they had a home quarter final and they blew it. They got a guy sent off in the first 4 minutes, and they were, running uphill for the entirety of that match. I think the following season they had another quarter final against Saracens, and they blew that as well. They got to the final in 12. We know we took them that year. We beat them in Pro 12 or whatever it was, final in the RDS. I think didn't was it Glasgow beat them in a final as well? No, maybe not. I'm not sure actually. I'm not sure if that happened. But like they've lost.
Did Glasgow not beat them? Glasgow beat them in the year that the last year Matt O'Connor. Was that not Glasgow who beat them?
I think Glasgow beat Munster in Ulster's ground.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
15 was the one we blew.
Yeah.
Our Matt O'Connor bad year where we came 6th.
Yeah. But we've beaten them in umpteen, big games, whether it's semi-finals or finals in the last season's Pro 14. So like
that's another one. They fired one shot.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Like they just seem to be unable to get the job done. And I don't know like how you fix that. I mean, but that needs to be seriously addressed. But they've gone in and they've got a coach like say Dwayne Peel as an assistant coach, but they can't manage to hold on to him. He's gone. I mean, they get somebody. We've gone through. They had Les Kiss there for a while. They had John O'Gibbs there for a season. Like we used to think that we had a high turnover of coaches in the noughties. Like they've had a pretty similar amount. Like it was interesting to see that say when John O'Gibbs was coaching at Leinster, he coached under 3 different coaches, and that he was here for 6 years. So like there was a longevity of a career that somebody obviously came in quite raw and he managed to grow through it, but he wasn't like here for a couple of seasons like Dwayne Peel, and okay, he's gone, but he's gone to a bigger, better role in Wales. But like all of that knowledge that he's built up is gone now from Ulster, and they have to start with somebody else. And instead of grabbing and getting 6 years of his knowledge out of him, they've got to start with somebody else now. I don't
probably beat us this weekend after all that.
Maybe they will. Like, you know what? Like,
they may well do, but it won't change anything.
Well, I think for the good of the league, it does need other clubs to be competitive in it, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah, and look, for the good of Irish rugby, we need them to be competitive, because as you say, Jason, we get absolutely hammered because of the amount of players we lose. But look, you look at that Ulster team, and there's good players in it everywhere. I mean, they develop pretty decent players, not as good as they think. They're not all as good as they think they are, but they develop some pretty good players. They brought in some very good players from around Ireland. I mean, guys like Jordy Murphy, who was a European Cup winner. Jack McGrath, okay, he's injured, that's fair enough. Marty Moore, who's a really good prop. They have Alan O'Connor there, who, funny enough, I was talking earlier about the under-20 World Cup back, 10 years ago, when Stephen Kitsoff was playing against Tyg Furlong. And Kitsoff had already played a bunch of Super Rugby, and Tyg Furlong was relatively unknown, and Furlong completely dominated him. But in that team, in 4, 5, and 6 were Alan O'Connor, Tyg Byrne, and Ian Henderson. So that kind of shows the quality of those guys who've been around for a while and do have that quality. There's guys like, for me, they think Stuart McCloskey's an awful lot better than he is.
Yeah, well, that's a minor detail in the.
That's one thing, but I mean, and they produce good players. I mean, you look at the guys who've come out of the Ulster system in the last 10 years, right? Now, admittedly, most of them have high numbers, but you've had Stockdale, Balakoon, Nevin Spence, he who shall not be named, the other one who shall not be named, McCloskey, Farrell, a lot of good players in the backs alone. And then, they've had Henderson and a couple of others in the forward.
And
And a
there's
couple of
no-
others.
and
They
there's-
lost a couple through injury early on, but you know they produced enough players. I mean, it's not like their academy is a complete failure, but whatever happens to them between coming out of their academy and coming out of the Irish under-20s and going into full-time professional rugby, something's happening to them because like Luke Marshall. We saw Luke Marshall in that game in the Aviva.
I thought he was going to be Neil O'Driscoll.
Yeah, never saw a player like an unbelievable performance. Best player on the pitch by quite some considerable distance. Now, okay, very unfortunate with injuries, but at the same time, they never extracted value from him at all.
You could never say that he exactly 100%, and he never seemed to fulfill his true potential. You know, he's probably got, at the top of my head, 15 Irish caps. The guy should have 50 Irish caps.
Yeah,
you know. Yeah, it's a tough one for them. I mean, like
Craig Gilroy,
there's another one, yeah. But like they had 4 guys that came through that. Jackson, you mentioned, Henderson, Gilroy, and what was the other guy?
Nevin Spence.
No, the fellow we were just talking about there.
Luke Marshall.
Luke Marshall. Like those 4 lads were outstanding in that under-20s match on the opening day of the Aviva.
The 4 best players on the pitch.
Yeah, and they were paired with Leinster. You know, like. And there were some good players from Leinster as well on that day, but not to the same standard as us.
Conster match.
Yes, that one.
That's
but I mean, like those guys. I mean, the Ulster players, and everybody thought that they'd push on. Even 2012, when it happened and they got absolutely munched in the final, people are like, well, there's a good core of young players there. They'd push on. But then, of course, the whole thing with Brian McLaughlin happened. Nobody really sure why that happened. They'd already got rid of, the most successful club coach in world rugby, in Mark McCall, or one of the most successful coaches in world rugby. I mean, he didn't last all that long there. There's something is rotten in the state. Something is rotten in the statelet.
Yeah. Well, see, I wonder though, like, are we just judging it from Leinster standards? And we have been just so uber successful over the last 12 or so seasons.
I was going to put in here, I'm putting in here now, and say that, there are 14 clubs in the league, and every year for the last 4 years, 13 of them have been disappointed, and Leinster have won the fucking thing. So,
well, the thing is, John, 14, there's 14 clubs in the league, 13 of them disappointed. Now, 13 of them have been disappointed. Only 1 or 2 of them have been disappointing. That's what my family are all from Ulster. I have a certain emotional tie to the province, and I just don't think that there's something wrong there. I don't know what it is. I'm not saying the coach is wrong, or I'm not saying the players are wrong. There's just something there that I wouldn't trust an Ulster team when the chips are down.
Well, they definitely have an inferiority complex playing us.
Oh yeah,
I mean, a couple of seasons ago we played Wasps in Coventry, and the night before we actually went to watch Leicester against Ulster, in Welford Road. So anyway, after the match, we were standing around, dressed in our Leinster gear, having a drink, and like the last thing that the Ulster fans wanted to do was play Leinster. Like they were terrified, and I think we ended up playing them in the quarterfinal that year. That's when Stockdale dropped the ball over the line, but they were absolutely terrified.
He got injured.
Yes, that's that same game, yeah. But like the Ulster fans, are not the players, but the Ulster fans were going, "Oh lads, go easy on us," and all this kind of crack. And we're going, like, be more concerned of playing an Irish provincial side as what happened on the day, because you would just think that every Irish side's going to up the ante playing against each other.
We were lucky to win on that day. I mean,
absolutely were.
Stockdale dropping the ball was the reason we won, pretty much.
Yeah. We were. Agreed to. But I'm just saying that the Ulster fans had no self-confidence that their team would. Whereas, you know what I mean? If we go away and even if we go and we're playing La Rochelle, like there was an air of confidence about us 2 or 3 weeks ago. There was, yeah, and we were kind of saying, "Wow, we should win by 5 points, 7 points, whatever it was." Do you know what I mean? We were confident that we were going to win.
11.
11, there you are. But like, I think if there was an Ulster version of this and they were playing in La Rochelle or Leinster next week, I just don't see that they would have that same level of optimism. But,
Yeah, no, I mean, the problem for them is when they play well, they lose, and when they play badly, they lose. Because they played well. They should have won, as you say, that quarterfinal. And they played really, really well. They were the better team on the day, and they lost. And that kind of feeds into it, that whole cyclical thing. But I think I just think that there's something. If I were a sports psychologist, I would be setting up a practice in Belfast because I reckon there's money to be made there.
Yeah, but like
I remember what's the man's name, and he's an Ulster man as well. He's from Tyrone.
Yeah, the McNulty.
McNulty. Yeah, you should get McNulty.
But he might be a Fear Gale, John.
He might be the wrong kind of Ulster man to get the Ulster team ticking. Do you reckon?
Well, I wouldn't suggest that now.
That's sectarian, Dave. You can't be saying that. Anyway.
But like I remember, I don't know, maybe nearly 30 years ago, Jim Staples, the Irish fullback at the time, was playing for Harlequin or London Irish or Harlequins, just before one of the Irish internationals. He said, "But Ireland are beaten before they go on the pitch," and this is in the early 90s. So psychologically, if that's one of your better players is turning around and saying, "Well, that was the feeling within the dressing room that before we run out onto the pitch, for whatever reason, we feel we're beaten." So, maybe there's some sort of psychological damage that the Ulster lads have. But anyway, who knows?
Let's hope it gets slightly worse over this weekend.
That led Enda McDulty will be earning his corn then, Dave, is what you're saying.
Oh, he would. My practice would be rushed. I'd have to open new offices.
Okay, I'm just a bit concerned about our selection at out half because if
we only have one, there's no choice.
If Ross Byrne was injured, if he wasn't taken off as a precaution, like we're down to fifth choice now.
Yeah, we're in the Hawkshaw Corkery pool of players.
I think Ross is okay. At least I hope he is. Otherwise, we are in trouble. You wonder as well, is Sexton, like, I know he's still out with concussion and, that's awful. And the guy has to think about his health before anything else. And I know the province do and Ireland does. But you have to think there was a part of him hanging in for a Lions call. And what will that change his, it'll either go two ways. He'll either want to get playing. So if anybody slips in the shower on a Lions tour, he's going to get on the plane. He can demonstrate his fitness, or else, if that doesn't happen, will he have second thoughts about playing on next year? Who knows?
There's lots of. The thing is, the team that the squad that starts a Lions tour, it very rarely bears a huge resemblance to the team that finishes one. Since the game's gone professional. I think it averages out at 6.5 players are called up per tour, and that doesn't include the proximity 6 or geography 6, whatever you want to call them. So there's a lot of guys who I'd say are not exactly, throwing away the address of the Tropical Medical Bureau.
For sure.
Not just in Ireland, but across Ireland and the UK. So
anyway, we do have Caelan Doris back for sure, they say, although he did pull out in a warm-up the last time, didn't he? And who else? Tommy O'Brien, is it? Is back?
Jimmy O'Brien. No, they're returning to training. They will be assessed for later this week.
I thought they were good to go, and it was.
I'll tell you what the exact wording is because I have the page open from the fixtures. 1 second. O'Brien and Doris back training ahead of Ulster test. Hope to resume full training this week after recovering from their respective injuries. And provided all goes well, both hope to be available for selection for Friday's game. So,
yeah,
Jimmy O'Brien's a player I like a lot.
Yeah, I like Tommy and Jimmy. Both good players. But anyway,
obviously, Caelan Doris is. If he'd managed to stay fit, he'd have been going on the Lions tour. I don't think there's any question of it.
Yeah.
At whose expense?
Well, he was ahead of Conan for Ireland.
At another player's expense.
That's what I was going to say.
Possibly at Conan's expense, because Conan wouldn't have had the game time if Doris had stayed fit. Maybe, I don't know. But I mean, Conan
But,
deserves
like,
a slot in the lines. He's been excellent. He really has, and he was excellent. He was one of the few players.
How are
not one of the
Leinster
few.
going to accommodate those two players? Like, are they going to move one of them?
They're going to ensure one of them's always injured.
But like, could they move one
lads,
to some other
you're
position
forgetting
in the back
something.
row?
You're forgetting something. It's not two
What?
players. It's 3 players.
At
Max
least 3
Deegan.
players. Yeah.
Max Deegan as well. I mean, I think, much as I'd hate to see them leave, I think we have to lose one of them. At least one of them will have to go, because it's not doing the Irish team any good to having one of them not playing at all, one of them playing limited, and the other, been away with the Irish squad. So,
but can they move one of like Darius to 6?
well, Jack Conan has played 6, Max Deegan has played 6, so maybe that might be an option. The only thing is there's a Mr. Ruddock and a Mr. Murphy who are both quite proficient at 6. I think Josh Murphy's a really good number 6. I think he's a real player for the future.
Yeah, well, it's hard to know anyway. But it's good to have those problems, but as you're right, I think they will need to do something, or they will be told to do something.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think what Leinster want to do and what's best for Irish rugby might be at odds, but what's best for Irish rugby probably should win out.
But even the players themselves might say, well, I want to play more frequently. Like you say, Max Deegan might say, well, Jesus Christ, the 2 Irish number 8s are in front of me.
And one of them's now a line.
Yeah, like that's
well,
tough,
that's it. I mean,
that's tough after coming back from injury. Like thinking, Jesus, I went off and I got badly injured and I came back and this has happened.
As I often say, one of the elements of being a professional player is playing professionally.
Yeah, that's it. So like it should be a good game, but I suppose the ball is in kind of Ulster's court, isn't it? Like, I mean, they've got to if they suffer another defeat, my God, like there could be, as you mentioned, there could be coaches
or on the bench.
Yeah.
The thing about it is, if Ulster get a good team on the pitch, they're good enough to win. We'll have to, I mean, if we're at our best, we will win, but they're good enough to win. So, the thing is it's all below the neck.
They haven't won in Dublin, or they rarely win in Dublin. They might have won
once this millennium.
Yeah,
2013 or something over Christmas or something like that.
Yeah, that's they don't win in Dublin. Even when Dublin is Ravenhill, they don't win in Dublin.
Well, they haven't won outside Ravenhill, in fact, because you have to count Twickenham as well. So
true.
They haven't won outside the province
and the Aviva.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is Dublin. Yeah.
It's Dublin, but records are made to be broken. And Connacht hadn't won since 2003, and then they won.
They are good enough, but I think I mean, if I were picking an Ulster team, there'd be changes I'd make to the back line.
Yeah, but
would you try and shoehorn Ian Madigan in there somewhere?
Well, the first thing I do is I try and shoehorn Stuart McCloskey out.
You could shoehorn Ian Madigan in there.
I'd also say to Stockdale, loved your work at number 15. Hope you enjoyed it. It's never going to happen again. Get back on the wing where you're a world-class player.
And put Will Anderson
he's going to be out, isn't he?
He's going to be out, but I'd have
Lowry.
I'd have Lowry, or I'd have Madigan, or I'd have anyone. Stockdale. I think they lose a lot by having Stockdale at fullback. This whole idea that he get involved more, it hasn't happened. What he's done is he's run into his nearest pod more. That's all. No, that's okay. He's retained possession of the ball. But he's not. That's not why they're playing him at fullback. They're playing him at fullback because they think he'd be like a bigger, taller, stronger Christian Cullen, and he's not. He's like a bigger, taller, stronger Rob Kearney, which is a good thing in terms of what a fullback should be doing, but in terms of what they expect him to do, very different thing indeed. So stick him back on the wing. Put Michael Lowry there.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see anyway. A long time since Ian Madigan played 15. I'd nearly at 12, soon to 15.
Seems a long time since he's played full stop.
It is a long time since he's played full stop. I just don't.
Teenager in Bristol, and now he's behind another almost teenager in Michael Lowry and Billy Burns as well. So that's not a ringing endorsement. That's two different coaches in two different clubs. And the guy's such a pro. He's such a great kicker. It's it's hard to see. It's hard to put all this together. And why is the guy not? Why has the guy not developed? Not developed is the wrong word, but why has he not got more game time at the clubs he's been in?
Yeah, it's hard to know because he's a good player, he's a good pro, and he's a good guy. So it's hard to know. Another young player also brought through this year is Blaine Mcelroy. He's a very talented player.
Yeah,
another in the production line of Ulster backs.
Yeah. They just need a few brutes in the pack, though.
Like look at the latest crop. You mentioned Lowry. You've got James Hume. You've got Balakoon. You've got the other lad on the wing. What's his name?
McElroy. Little.
There's two more I wasn't even thinking of, but there's another guy as well. There's a shitload of them anyway.
And there's another guy who's I'm not sure if he's the Irish record holder or the Irish schools record holder, the 110.
Yes.
I can't remember his name now.
Sexton.
There you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like he chose rugby over athletics. Now maybe he kind of prefers
I think he might have got injured in an A match for the Ravens. I think he did.
Okay. Anyway, look, we'll see what happens on Friday night. Also on Friday night's Munster Connacht, so I'm looking forward to those two games. But before we've kind of run over a bit here. But
if we're lucky, Bundy Aki be playing because I love Bundy.
Yeah, well, hopefully he stays injury free.
You love Bundy, Dave.
Huh?
You love Bundy.
No, I mean, anytime anyone talks about guys coming over and project players and they're only in it for the cap and they're only in it for the money, Bundy Aki is the perfect 2-word answer.
Yeah, he loves it in Connacht, doesn't he? And I'm sure he got bigger offers to go either to different clubs in France or even, I'm sure there was.
Well, he did have the tinge of regret when Pat Lam pulled out when he just signed.
But maybe
he stayed. He stayed. That's the thing.
He kind of was sold a bit of it, and like there's plenty of players have managed to extract themselves from contracts and move elsewhere. Like you know what I mean?
He was sold a bit of a pup by Pat Lam.
Well. But like you could say people might have a criticism of Quinn Roux, but the fact is, like, I know, but some people might of grabbing the caps and going. But he has said he wants to come back, and when his time wherever he moves to is over, he wants to come back and raise his family in Galway. So that's ringing endorsement of someone that's settled into the community here.
Yeah.
And on the podcast that I heard him say. He said, look, I've lived in Ireland for a third of my life. That's a big chunk of someone's, 9 years.
9 years is not fly by night. It's not even very slow walk by night.
And you think like you leave when you're 20 and your parents and your grandparents are all, especially when it's like so far away, it's not like I can just jump on a Ryanair plane and go back to see my grandparents in England or whatever.
Especially
not now. But like he's come a long way from South Africa, that your grandparents and your uncles and all that kind of thing are all getting older. Your parents getting older, and he's decided to move here for the last 10 years and wants to come back and settle in Galway when he's done. So like I think you have to sort of doff your hat to him a bit for that. Dave, you will love this. RT and Virgin to share the Six Nations.
Saw that. Whatever about RT. I think Virgin coverage of the Six Nations has been excellent.
Yeah.
RTE's coverage of rugby is trite and cliche ridden, and they never met a stereotype they didn't like to trot out on a regular basis. So I'm sure hopefully they get all the away games that we can watch on BBC. Or UTV or ITV, whichever.
Yeah.
But all those guys that kind of bedeviled RT rugby coverage and damaged the game for so long, they're all gone. They're all retired. The only one that's there is Darrell Breen, who I actually quite like. I've met him a couple of times. He's a nice guy. I don't like, sometimes he can be a bit snide, but on screen, but off screen, he's a nice guy. I don't know. A lot of those guys who work in punditry now are all freelancers anyway. So you could find out you had the same
of
country
course.
team on every channel, you know.
Yeah,
You'd
of
have
course.
Raj and Shaggy and
Ferris
Maddie
or-
Williams and Ferris every week, whether it's RTE or thing. So, I mean, in fairness to Virgin Media, I was not over enthralled when they got the gig, but they did a really good job with it, it has to be said.
And they got absolutely ginormous viewing figures as well. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's amazing when you do see the yearly viewing figures of rugby, how many matches are up in the top, say, 20 of
top 5.
Yeah, top 5 even, yeah. There's quite
Yeah.
a few, and it's great to see. But, you know...
But that goes back to what I was saying about the ability of Irish rugby to promote itself, because it is a minority sport. But for that month, it's all about rugby in Ireland.
Yeah.
And if we could utilise some of that expertise in promoting the Pro 14, it would be nice.
It would be nice. And, you know, I wonder what they're going to do when the Pro 14 contract comes up. I mean, like, I haven't heard anything of whether it's going to be free
the
to
word
air
is
or
Sky.
Is it?
That's the word. But I mean, there's not a whole lot of players unless somebody comes out of the blue. I mean, Air Sport are going bye-byes. BT are looking to shift on their sports channels, get them off the books. So whether it goes Sky or something like DAZN, who are trying to get into the European market, or Amazon, who are trying to expand their sports portfolio, it's hard to know. Premier Sports are geo-locked in Ireland because Air had the rights. Whether that'll change, whether they'll keep them. I mean, there are options out there. I mean, RTE could come in with a bid, God forbid. TG Carr do a pretty good job. You know, they do commit to the games. People complain about, oh, it's in Irish, but I mean, they commit to the games. They do a good half hour, 45 minutes beforehand, good half hour, 45 minutes afterwards. You know, they don't skimp on the production value. So, you know, there are options out there. Everybody wants Sky because Sky are perceived to be kind of the home of rugby since their time with Super Rugby and stuff like that. And they don't actually have any rugby at the moment except for summer stuff. So they want a winter program.
They have the Lions. So
Premiership they want a winter. That's all they have. They only have summer rugby.
No, but I mean, as though if they do have the Lions, it might push them, you know, sort of where you might take up a subscription. If you're a rugby fan, you might take up a subscription to watch the Lions, and then you go, oh well, look, the Pro 14's on for whenever it comes back in September,
with 3/4 of the Lions squad in it, or 2/3 or whatever. So I mean, people like Sky for. I mean, it could be anyone. Yeah. I'd say they'll find a broadcaster. The question is whether it will be a broadcaster that'll pay, because CVC want their money.
I wonder if they're like, a few years ago they seemed to do it on terrestrial. I remember they had like the sort of the regional BBC channels, that Alba, BBC Northern Ireland, and BBC Wales, and what's the S4C?
BBC S4C, yeah. They had that was the TV rights were owned by regional channels in entirety. You had all those regional channels. Then you had RTE and you had TG Carr.
Exactly, yeah. I wonder if they'll do that again. I don't know. It seemed to work the last time. I mean, I was a bit questioning whether or not we'd get to actually see some of the games, but in fairness, I can't remember ever not seeing a Leinster game.
Yeah, well, the advantage was because for home games, there was,
you were at them.
You were at them, but there was also 2 channels here in Ireland, Republic of, to watch them. And then for the away games, they were playing the teams that were being covered abroad anyway. So
yeah. So we'll see. Just one other bit. Ireland have announced that they're going to play Japan and USA in lieu of the
revenge
to Fiji. Yes, well, I mean, that could be a very tricky fixture for Ireland. Obviously, Japan will have played the Lions in their warm-up match, but Ireland are going to be shorn 8 of their lines.
Yeah.
So we saw how we got on when we didn't have too many people missing.
Be interesting to see.
Yeah. And just finally, before we go, they have announced the further fixtures of the Pro 14 or the Pro 12 Rainbow Cup. So we've got, after the Ulster match, with a bye week, then we have Glasgow away, is it? No,
yes,
they're away, and then we've Dragons at home.
Yeah.
So, it just seems strange that they've put had a bye week in there and didn't have another fixture. Just
I'm
sure there's a reason for it.
I don't see what the problem is scheduling.
I don't think
another
anyone
game.
cares.
No, but I mentioned it earlier. The club seem to care because if they're actually playing their full strength,
I know. No, I'm just thinking of the idea that the Pro 14 sent out the fixture list, and then just as they were reading it, they went, "Oh shit, there's a hole in this somewhere," and they hadn't even noticed.
I know. It does seem, but like I'm sure it must be. They probably did exhaust all possibilities of trying to get fixtures with the South African team, and it was out of their hands. I mean, and that just put the kibosh on their whole plans.
Yeah.
And then what was left was a bit of a disaster, and a PR disaster, because they obviously cut short the regular season of the Pro 14 early, got rid of playoffs and all that kind of stuff to bring. Yeah, so like they're between a rock and a hard place. And
it was a sticking plaster trying to fix a massive gash.
Yeah, but the thing is, I'd rather have it this as we're having now. We have some games to watch.
I'd rather have the rugby. Yeah, absolutely.
This time last year, we had nothing to watch. We were watching reruns of
Tiger King.
Of Tiger King. There you go. That's exactly what we were doing. So look, it's better than nothing.
Certainly is. Absolutely agree.
It is. Yeah. And on that note, gentlemen, I just want to thank everyone for watching. Thanks very much, Dave and John, for your contributions. And if you're following us, Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, please give us a like, subscription, and thumbs up. Thank you.